That way, we've got a record of it, and then I'll share it with you once I upload it. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. So I think this is, again, especially want to thank Elizabeth for coming in again, and for all the help that you're giving us with this, Elizabeth. It's much appreciated. So I guess this has all been prompted because of the questions that you guys asked, which it was good that you asked those questions, because it allowed us to then establish the direction that you're going and to determine whether that's where Elizabeth actually wants you to go. And so from that perspective, I know that I pushed you towards the whole idea of people and process, but another discussion with Elizabeth today suggests that's probably not the key area that she wants you to look at. So I might hand over to Elizabeth just to talk a little bit about what her interpretation of what you sent through today is, and some of the changes that she made. So I shared those documents with you this afternoon after she provided them to me, but it might be a good idea just to talk through those documents. And then that way, I think it's going to make it a little bit easier, because you're going to be able to focus on some specific areas that Elizabeth is interested in. So I'll hand it over to you, Elizabeth. And if you have any questions at any time, guys, just raise your hand and ask. I think that's the best way to do this.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you all for joining this tonight. It's great what you've done so far, and the questions are really good, and apologies for any confusion. That's why we're having this meeting, to just clear it up and try and get you a bit more understanding of what we're doing and what we're looking to do. So I don't know the best format. I've got your questions here in front of me, or just to my left.
I'm just thinking, Elizabeth, maybe we can put up the revised brief, just in terms of just speaking to those 5 dot points that you and I spoke about earlier today.
Yep.
And then we can go to the questions.
Yeah, excellent.
Hello, Melinda. How are you going?
So do you want, have you got them handy, or would you like me to share them, Andrew?
I don't have them. Oh, I need to give you I don't have them because I'm on a different computer. But
no, all good.
What I'll do is I'll have you got access to do it? I might need to give you. I've
got both of them. I've got the revised one and the original brief on my computer right now, side to side.
Do you want to give Gabriella access?
Yeah,
that'd be great, Gabriella. Yeah. Thank you.
Are we looking at the project expectations?
So I'm just making you a co-host.
Yeah.
So there were three documents. I can get them if there's any issue, but there were 3 documents.
That's okay. I'm just seeing how.
The first one was the brief, which with a couple of minor changes on it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I don't know if I can share both of them at the same time, but
you can't. No.
I'll see, because with work we can actually share the desktop by itself. That's fine. So this one is just the revised.
Yes, that's the one.
That's perfect. Yep. So essentially, we are keen and happy for you to progress according to these. I numbered them because I was thinking I'd do a bit of a in sequence of preference, and I suppose that's how they are at the moment. But four's the crux of it. So as much as I say, the preference for is the nuts and bolts, but let's start at the beginning. So doing a SWOT, and I think you may have done that, but it just in the document that was shared with Harry and I, that wasn't visible. So I think it would be important for us to see what you've put into the SWOT, if you've done one, and if you haven't, to do one. Identifying local competitors. So it's fantastic you've identified competitors, but unfortunately for us, they're not really relevant because we're not in the same space as it were geographically. We exist, they exist, and it's neither here nor there, so it's not comparable. So if you're able for dot point to look locally, and some of them are referenced in the briefing notes that we provided, and you've referenced some of them, but we haven't gone into much detail. We haven't gone into much detail with some of it. The reason 3 is there is just to give a reference point, I suppose, and some ideas. So we're keen for you to look at what, and it doesn't have to be locally, but obviously if it's local, we get that comparison for what people here do, but that might be able to be stretched out beyond local in terms of what other non-profits in the disability space do as fundraising campaigns. Just dive into question 4 while I think of it, and I'm more than happy to go back to any of these. And I recognise I'm probably speaking quite quickly and you're like, slow down. Hand to heart is a concept. At this point in time, there are no teeth or flesh to that. Think of it as a skeleton. It's an idea. It came about before I commenced with Mercy Connect, and it was an idea that my predecessors had. And so I'm now tasked with Harry to make it into something, and that's why we're seeking your help, because we thought, you know, you're eating and breathing this as students and speaking the language, and we're sitting on the other side going, oh, we've just inherited this concept, but it doesn't have flesh. So it could be called, for all intents and purposes, Make a Donation. That's neither here nor there. The name is simply what's been chosen. There was a bit of a launch, I suppose, that occurred a couple of years ago when it first came into place. And originally on our website, we had a page where it said Make a Donation, which we still have, but we've put it in the background. And the intent was that our participants, who are our clients, their artwork was being sold through that platform. And that was all that Hand to Heart was. So we're looking to elevate it and make it much more of a household and known, like Red Nose Day, which that probably so old, it's not relevant, but think of anything at the moment that occurs, Jeans for Jeans Day, etc., etc. We're trying to make Mercy Connect have something that people understand is our fundraising campaign and what we do annually or throughout the year to incentivize people to donate money to us, because they recognize there's, you know, they see a reason to do it. So that's what we're trying to get from this. I'm just trying to think. 5 isn't as important. I mean, it's ideal, but if that's too much, or you're trying to get the others done, I'm not as concerned about it. We talk about a replacement campaign. That's if you think there's a better idea out there. Having said that, Hand to Heart isn't anything at the moment. It's just an idea. So whether you think a rename is better, like I said, I think you could call it anything. It's just at the moment we have an idea and we don't have much around how to make it into something more tangible and relatable. Has anyone got any questions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that definitely does make sense. I just kind of want to go to, so you mentioned how you didn't really see too much of the SWOT. And then I know that one of my questions, I know I didn't really post a lot of questions because I just thought the girls had so many other questions, which kind of looked into my part. So I'm looking at one of my sections is the environmental analysis. And I did ask about technology and you said that it's not relevant. So I just wanted to clarify on that. So part of my environmental analysis is, I know probably a lot of like information overload, but I'm looking at what we call a pestle model. So I'm looking at different environmental factors that help within your industry to growth. And so I think my question around technology was what sort of, I mean, it's looking at both, sorry, just give me just. Sorry about that. I just had an unwanted visitor. I guess what I was going back to saying is, so I'm looking at like different environmental factors. So like with technology, I think I probably didn't word it correctly, but are there any like technological like trends or barriers or advantages that you see with working for non-profit and for working with Mercy Connect? And if you kind of implement any of that with, obviously with marketing and with how you even just use like with your like products and services, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, sure. So 2 things to that. I've done a PESTLE as part of, I'm studying at the moment. So one of the subjects I'm studying needed a PESTLE analysis. So I might dig that out and I can share that with you.
Yeah, that would be great actually.
Yeah, and look, it might be light on in some areas. I've actually put the communications draft strategy together as well. So it's got the PESTLE analysis in it. So I'll pull them out and share them with you. And obviously that's my take on what I think Mercy Connect's PESTLE areas are.
Yeah.
And some obviously are lighter on than others because, you know, we might name 10, if you're doing a SWOT, for instance, you might have 10 strengths and you can't think of as many weaknesses. So The PESL's similar. Some of those areas are quite full and others are really light on. In terms of the technology, we took that out because we weren't sure whether you were referring to the VR that we've created, which obviously is there to assist our participants and to help them to live more fulfilled lives. The VR is actually more about the students. So that's wrong of me to say. It's about trying to enable empathy and understanding about a person's situation from a cognitive impairment situation. So we use technology. Harry uses all manner of social media and web platforms to convey our messages and get information out. And it's now becoming much more of a tool to convey information to our families and our stakeholders, I suppose. Technology.
Just in regard to technology, though, I just want you to be careful that you don't confuse what we mean by technology in a pestle. So technology, really, when you're talking about technology, it's really thinking of it in context of the market and the end user or the person that's going to donate. Do they need a minimum level of technology to be able to do business with you? Is really what that's about. So when we talk about social media and what have you, that's really, we're talking about that. That's a tactic.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really fall into the pestle analysis, because it's really what pestle is saying. Well, if we think about it from the political system, well, what politics exist at the moment? So who's the political party that's in power? Does that affect us? So if and it more likely isn't going to affect you. So that's not that's what you're talking about. It can be a small one. If you think about it from the perspective of economical concerns, well, you've just had interest rates go up in the last the last three meetings. So there's been interest rates go up. So that affects you immediately, because then people are going to have less money to be able to donate or what have you. Petrol prices are up. The general cost of living is up. So from an economic perspective, that's going to be really important to you, Gabriella, to be able to understand what's happening economically, and particularly in the markets that we're talking about. When we talk about technology is really asking within the market itself, is there any technological barriers, or is there any technological advantage that may exist? So I think that's where you need to go with that. We mentioned before that yes, technology you use and people can, and look, if we're going to, it's a little bit difficult to do it here, because I think from a technological perspective, we're kind of at a, well, it might be, it might be in an area where, if you think about what's the 5G, for example, 5G might be in an area, but it might not be somewhere else. And so it might be stuff like that you might consider. But just be careful not to confuse social media, which is a communication tool, with the technological requirements that the organisation needs their customers or their donors to have. And that might be, like you mentioned before, virtual reality. There might be a VR platform that people might use, or for people to access that, they need an element of they need a certain level of technology that they're able to use. Like us now, we're using Zoom. 5 years ago, not everybody had access to this because the internet speeds weren't quick enough. That's what we're talking about. Does that make sense to everybody, or have I confused you more by saying that?
No, makes sense.
Makes sense. Are you in agreement with that as well, Elizabeth?
Yeah, definitely. And you've just made me think that when I did the PESL, and obviously that's coming from not a fundraising, but what in general Mercy Connects, as you'll see when I share it with you, I've looked at cyber security and things like that. So it's just come to me when you've said that, Andrew. But I think you're right. It is actually, as you've said, Andrew, how our the people we're reaching out to would be impacted and what they need in order to. And I suppose a lot of what we do does assume that they have some sense of, one, having an internet, two, knowing how to use it. And when you look at our clients, a lot of them wouldn't know and do actually have difficulty with being online and being able to communicate with it. So there's a lot of assumptions we make as an organisation that their support, their family and their supporters can actually do the same. So just going on that point, we From a pure communication perspective, we have a handful of people who are carers, family members of our participants who don't have the internet, so we can't send them an email or digital information. We have to send them post so snail mail, the traditional print, which means anything we send out immediately. There's obviously that delay when they get it, and at the moment there's COVID updates still going out, which in our industry are pertinent because COVID hasn't gone anywhere as much as we all like to pretend it has. So there's some issues around that, getting the messages out and making sure people are aware, because we all like to assume everyone's got digital capability that they actually may not have.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Did you want me, are there any other questions around those dot points that you're to focus on, or do you want me to look at the questions, or do you need some clarity around some of the questions that have been asked?
Do you guys have any further questions? Like, I mean, for my part, I'm pretty happy with the answers I've gotten.
I think if we go to those questions, Elizabeth, as we're going through that will help us to, I mean, any other questions that might be relevant to what we just spoke about, they might emerge as a result of that. So,
okay.
So who wants to share this one? Is that going to be, have you got that as well, Gabby, or do you want us to?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds and I'll bring it up. I just made sure
I can get it as well. I just, hang on.
No, I've got it here. Let me share.
Just as long as you're doing it, we'll let you run it.
Okay, and questions.
Because I carefully put it on my other computer, so I've got two laptops running, and I've got it to refer to, but it's better on screen, I think. You're right, Andrew. We can all see it.
Okay. So there's a lot of questions here, and so I think even there, I think in terms of the number of questions, we may want to kind of narrow it down to some extent. But let's go through and let's ask. So there's some questions here. What is your current approach towards the market? So there's a response there. So that gives you some information of what's currently happening. That's a beautiful cat.
He had to make an appearance.
Absolutely, yeah. But what I want to be clear on here is that whilst we're interested to know what is currently happening, don't get caught in the trap of just providing the same thing. You know, that's a really dangerous, I mean, unless you absolutely agree with it, but we just want to be careful that you don't kind of give back what they're already doing. Because when you think about it, the whole idea of a marketing plan is to look at what's happening in the environment in this moment in time. So we should be looking forward rather than looking back. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Current budget is answered. How does Mercy Connect perceive themselves in comparison to their competitors? Now, again, this is an interesting one because Elizabeth mentioned it just a moment ago. She said that in terms of some of the competitors that have been put forward, they're not real competitors. And this goes back to that idea of when you talk about positioning. So if you think about how you're positioned within a market, there'll be a lot of players within the market who you're not directly competing with, okay, because they're actually positioned somewhere else within the market. So they're in the same industry and they're doing a similar thing, but from a position point of view, they're actually somewhere else. And so what we really want to be very clear on is that when you're looking at Mercy Connect and who are the, so how they perceive themselves in comparison to their competitors, what you need to do is be very clear about who the local competitors are. So is there anything we can help them with in terms of the local competitors, Elizabeth? Like we're saying that they need to know who are the local competitors that they need to be aware of.
Our biggest one is Kirinari, which was mentioned in the report.
Okay.
We've also got, as I think Harry's put, we went through this together on screen today, but I'm pretty sure it says somewhere in this response sheet that there's a lot of unregistered competitors. So the trick is we've become as an industry a much more, because of the NDIS, the individual now chooses. It once used to be that as an entity we had funding given to us and therefore we would reach out to people in need and say we'll help you. Now the shoe's on the other foot and people get their funding, whatever it is. Some people get generous packages, and when I say generous, I don't mean it as in they shouldn't get it. They get sufficient to get what they need. Others really struggle because they don't get much. but the individual now gets the money, and so they have the power, which it should be, and they have the control. So they choose, would I like Mercy Connect? Would I like Kirinari? Would I like the one that just popped up literally yesterday because somebody came up with the idea that they'd like to be a disability provider, which they're allowed to do now. You don't have to be registered. So consequently, there is a huge amount of competition simply because people are finding, I don't like my job doing whatever, I'm going to become an NDIS disability provider because I can. And that is currently how the market's going. The latest election campaign, though, there's been a commitment in the now government, Labor government, to change that. They're looking to make sure that not so much people can't be registered, but the funding will go to the registered organisations. So I suspect in the coming year, a lot of the competitors will drop off because they're not going to receive the same that registered providers do. And that will bring about more stringency in terms of the care that people receive, because unfortunately at the moment with the non-registered providers, for want of a better term, it's quite a common one to use, you know, there's some real cowboys out there. Reputable service is one thing, but if you perceive that somebody can give you more, you'll go down that path as an individual because that's your right. It's like anything. If you want something, you know, you have the choice where to go. So there has been, even though NDIS has been around for the last 6 or 7 years now, it's still relatively new in the scheme of how traditionally disability care is provided. So Kirinari, as I said, is our biggest competitor. There's also Live Better, and there's a handful of others that exist, but I would say they're the two main competitors. They're all in the same boat when it comes to trying to get employees in. We've got a huge turnaround with that, which is a whole separate issue. It doesn't really affect at the moment the marketing component. It ebbs and waves. We've got a really healthy opportunity to get a job at the moment. And again, because of that, that brings about the whole, oh, I don't like what you're doing, I'll go somewhere else. So that's just a current market. And eventually that will settle and we'll go back to how it was. But that's just our now situation.
So just based on that, ladies, I think what you need to think about is in terms of competitors. So it's Live Better, it's Kirinari, I think is what you said.
Kirinari, yeah.
But then you might have a category which you can call non-registered providers,
yeah.
and that would cover. So you're not going to try and get individual competitors, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then if there's another category that might be a little bit that we've missed, that might be something that you might put in there as well. So from that perspective, you're really looking at those 3, maybe 4 primary competitors. And so that I think would be useful rather than trying to identify every individual person out there that's waving a flag.
Yeah, don't do that. You'll be there all day. Yeah. And in Orange, just to cover that off, Live Better is our main competitor there.
Okay. All right. Does hand to heart focus mean more from a B2B focus?
Sorry, Andrew, you go.
No, I was just saying that's saying that there is a donation document that's been provided.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that information is provided in there.
Correct. It's just a little bit of a document that was put together before I commenced that does specifically talk around that. So, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, let us know if when you see the document whether that's not clear enough. But that's essentially how. Yeah, you've got your hand up, Melinda.
Yeah. So I had a look at the document, and I don't know if it's done on purpose or not, but for the first column, I guess it's highlighted blue, and I was wondering is there a focus on the first one, or is it just colored that way? So
just colored that way. Apologies. We ripped it out of a document that was existing, and I said to Harry, don't start reformatting. So it wasn't meant to cause confusion. It was simply just designed that way for the purpose of the document itself, the look pretty factor. So yeah, apologies for any confusion there.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay, so how are new clients reaching out to Mercy Connect? So word of mouth referrals from specialist workers, etc. So that's been answered. But again, you might think about who your target audience is as well, and in terms of some of the behaviours that you might have identified that might change that. But it's giving you the answer there anyway. So, but if you see something else, then you can talk about it. What kind of feedback are clients providing, and how do they perceive Mercy Connect to competitors? Okay, so again, that's information that's been provided. Clients have choice and shop around. So Elizabeth just spoke about that. People will leave if they are unhappy. Difficult to gain exit interviews as they are gone before we know. Participation surveys sent out every year to see how they are tracking. Okay. All right. So Sophie's questions: what position in the perceptual map market are they? Speak to this question. Little to no brand recognition. Ignore what Andrew has said about position.
Yeah, we're just going to put you out there, Andrew. So essentially that is, even though it is happening at the moment with some staff issues, let's, for your sake, not muddy that water. I think, if you were 2 years into the market and had a better experience, I suppose, and I don't mean you don't have experience, but if you were more entrenched, we might explore that. But for your sake and what we're trying to achieve with this, let's not worry about the staffing issues that we're having or some of the reputation issues, because that's just making it more difficult for you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, and that's what that was what my email intended today when I sent it out. And I said, well, it may actually narrow down what you have to do. So from that perspective, you don't need to go into that detail. Mercy Connect are aware of it and they're addressing it, and that's all we need to worry about there. Are they looking to improve their promotion aspects, considering visual branding, website design? Okay, so this is all tactical, are all tactics. So again, when you think about anything to do with tactics, so promotion, being one of the 4 Ps, the original 4 Ps. Yes, people, the objective or the intention is to increase brand awareness. So from that perspective, what you need to consider as a group is, if that's the objective, then how are we going to implement that? How are we going to increase that brand awareness? Okay.
And to speak to it simply, there is our website was revamped a couple of years ago. Since Harry has commenced, which was a year ago, a whole lot more ongoing marketing has been occurring and presence, social media wise and web wise and media wise. We generally do 1 to 2, which I think I'm talking to something up ahead, but 1 to 2 media releases, of which we have a relatively good pickup rate from the media, be it print or radio or television. So we're quite lucky, especially in Albury, with a lot of that. Orange less so. And that may not be helped by the fact we've always got that conundrum. The central office is in Albury, where I'm based and where Harry is based, and the corporate office exists there. So the trick obviously is to try and keep the love going for the office that isn't on our back doorstep. And we're mindful of that at the moment, but we're not looking to change our image or our logo at the moment, where they're quite well known. It's more, we would love to obviously get even more exposure across the community, just from a brand awareness perspective. And we are doing, don't listen, Andrew, we are doing some radio awareness locally. That's been decided. And in Orange, we won't be, because that's where our staffing issues are sitting. So
so just what I want you to think about here, guys, is just from the theoretical side and why we're doing what we're doing. Think of it in context of communication objectives. So Elizabeth has said that it's about building awareness. So you might consider the AIDA model. So AIDA model is where they talk about awareness, interest, desire, action. So it's a sales funnel. And so when you do any type of advertising, then you're looking at it, you're somewhere on this model. So you're either at the awareness stage, and Elizabeth more or less mentioned that they have a logo, people are already familiar with the logo. So in context of that, awareness is awareness. From your perspective, you might be saying maybe an awareness campaign is not the best approach here. Maybe it's about you might be trying to direct them into that desire stage. Desire being, we're aware of the organization, we're interested in what you do, but now we've got to build some desire into terms of why you would use our organization. And that's where you might talk about emotional appeals or rational appeals or whatever the case may be. So yeah, so when we're talking about any type of promotion, don't just come in and say, well, use social media or do a radio advertisement, please consider it in context of what the communication objective is and where it sits on the AIDA model. Okay. If you're not sure what the AIDA model is, just look it up, AIDA model. It's pretty straightforward, and I'm happy to talk to you about it after this if we have to. Okay. Okay, where are we? I think we've how known is the brand? Has it reached a large audience or expanded in terms of exposure? Is there enough brand recognition? So I see these are Sophie's questions. Sophie's not here, so it's a bit hard to expect you guys to be able to answer.
I'm still taking notes for Sophie anyway.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll give you the recording. But as we've said, there's little brand recognition where they're looking to increase that. And again, it goes back, it's related to what I just talked about in context of the AIDA model.
And if Sophie, I know you're not here, but if you want clarity around this and you're not sure, or you do have a burning question, I'm more than happy. Same with any of you if you've got questions after this. And apologies, I'm just going to say that the crossouts are only there so that Harry and I could track what we'd answered and hadn't. And when we say not relevant, it's not meant to be offensive. It's just we couldn't. For us, it doesn't match what we're looking to try and achieve. But if you absolutely want to explore it, let me know. The VR was created separately to the marketing, and it's there, as I said, which may not have been clear before, to assist people coming in to have more empathy and understanding around cognitive impairment and how people function, particularly around autism. So it's, it sits in a separate area to marketing and comms anyway from a budget perspective, and the cost is there. It's not an ongoing one, so it's very separate to what we have available as a marketing budget.
Right, perfect. Yeah, and I think that's important. When you're dealing with the client, what will happen always is that certain things will come up and then some things get removed, other things get brought in. That's normal process. So anything that there's nothing to apologize for, Elizabeth, because that's how it works. Okay, so it's fine.
Yeah, I just didn't want that whole, why have they crossed it out? Because
no, that's fine.
Not trying to say it's not relevant.
But it's you don't need to discuss it in this assignment.
Yeah.
And it's something that they can certainly be aware of, but they don't need you to deal with at the moment.
Okay.
What does the organisation want to take next when it comes to marketing? What is their priority right now? Okay, so this really is a question around communication objectives in terms of what we just spoke about. So looking at increasing brand awareness in Albury and rebuilding brand reputation and awareness in Orange. Okay, so they're the two markets that we're focusing on. What is their perspective towards their marketing strategy? Is it effective, or what would they like to alter? Strategy is effective, but not targeting the right audience. Okay, so that's a key point. Okay, so if we're not targeting the right audience, then understanding who the right audience is would be an important part of this discussion or this marketing plan. Have they considered? Go ahead.
No, it's okay. All good. I was just going to clarify that by that, it was out of our discussion with Andrew that Harry and I had. We very much realised, as much as we do the promotion, and we, sorry, my daughter's just come in. One moment. And
so it's not just cats that jump into Zoom sessions.
Bless my child. She just made a very loud home. You all needed to know that. Yeah, so we now realise we don't necessarily, as much as I said we're doing radio, so it sounds like a complete contradiction. We need to get better at targeting people who may come on board as a participant client, and we need to get better at targeting people who are their carers and their support people. Because when they know we exist, obviously they then can say, we'd like to become a client of yours. So it's fine to tell the world we exist, but from a targeted approach and ensuring we get the people in a more specific targeted way, that's what we need to do. So that's what that refers, need to get better at it. And Harry and I, we are cognizant of it now, and we can try to change how the approach is made and what we do around building brand awareness and targeting the right people and ensuring they know that we exist. And if any of you have any ideas about how to do that, obviously we can't just go into another disability service and say, hi, we're here. So it can be quite a tricky conversation, and word of mouth is one of our areas that we do know people find out about us, but we're not necessarily out there having a conversation. So it's by default, by someone knows someone. So it's be nice to be able to improve that area.
But it still goes back to our comment before. It's not what Mercy Connect is doing now. It's what you think they should be doing going forward. So
Yeah.
it's good to understand what they're doing now, but what we're saying is that we really want a very specific and targeted approach. And so from that perspective, if you think about the different tools that you can use to get that specific approach, if you think about radio and television is very much used as a mass media approach, whereas social media is much more targeted. And so it's actually considering people, like all the data that you can pick up in social media can really target people very directly. So you might go there with that. Okay. Have they considered further enhancing promotion when it comes to social media? Okay, so that's kind of just what we've talked about, but had external expertise feedback received increased the social media presence in the past year? Further improvements is still to be had. And look, I'll say this, social media is a great tool, but it's not a simple tool. And so social media can be very effective when it's done correctly, but doing it correctly is the challenge. But anyhow, that's one of you might be might be all over the whole social media side of things, and you might have a different opinion, so that's fine. Victoria, what would they say that they do really well as an organisation, or what services do they provide that sets them aside from other competitors? Is there anything in particular they would like to be better recognised for? So you've got 4 areas here. So quality of care, values-based, training is robust, COVID impacting staff retention, etc. Now, I just want to go back to the what's it called? Hand to heart. So when we talk about the services, that's really we're talking about in terms of the services that we're providing to people that need the services. But see, there's 2 different things here, because there's those people, when we're doing the hand to heart, that's about donations, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're kind of doing 2 things that require 2 separate marketing plans here. Because if you think about what the services that the organisation provides, that's about trying to, I'll call them customers, even though it's probably not the right term, but it's about trying to get customers to engage with the organisation and use the services. But when you're trying to get people to donate to the organisation, I feel that's a different product. What are your thoughts on that, Elizabeth?
I think you're quite right. I mean, obviously, if we're looking for people to donate, we want them to be able to understand what we do and have a sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? They can relate. It needs to be relatable. Whereas you're quite right, a client or participant, whatever you want to call them, somebody choosing what we do is and us to give it to them, it's possibly a different reason that they might, reach out to us. How we now just do what you've just said, whether we need to just break away from hand to heart and focus on, I don't know what you think.
I'm just thinking we either focus on hand to heart,
yeah,
in terms of making that the key product that we're promoting, as opposed to promoting all the services to anybody that would be interested in using them.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still going to have to talk about the services, and you still need to talk about the areas. Everything that we've discussed is still relevant.
Yeah.
But irrespective, like in terms of your competitors, do they seek donations as well?
Some of them do, and I'm not actually familiar with whether they do it in a similar way to what we're proposing through a hand to heart. I'm not aware. If they do, it's certainly not something that comes to mind. I can speak to any other organisation here, say in the need more. Well, hang on. How do I say this? There are autism services here, so as much as they're part of disability, they specialise in autism, people with autism, and care for them. Yeah. So they have some campaigns, and there are other specialist organisations that exist in Albury, not necessarily disability, that have campaigns for fundraising. I'm not aware of any that Kirinari or Live Better do. So if they do, it hasn't come across my radar.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the brand awareness discussion, what the objective is to develop brand awareness. But then if we think of it in context of a call to action, then the objective there is to get people to donate. Okay. So there's two distinct objectives here. And so I think in terms of trying to get people to use the services, I think that's a separate thing to what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And you can disagree with me if you don't think I'm right, and I'm talking to all of you. What are your thoughts on that?
No, Andrew, I think that's actually, you've brought up a really good point here, because it's not just about the brand awareness, but again, the call to action. So I think that if we put our focus on one over the other, instead of incorporating them both, I think we'll have a better outcome in the end.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to combine the two and just only giving half our attention to each, just trying to get it all done.
I think it gives it focus, because otherwise it becomes a generic campaign, in the sense that we're trying to cover off all these different things, and they're different target markets, they're different communication objectives, they're different things that we're trying to achieve. And I think when you try to do it that way, it's not specific enough, that then you lose some of the traction that you might otherwise get.
I agree. I think the call to action, you'd like to have it resonate with what you exist and
With what you
stand
do,
for.
yeah.
Yeah. So the quality care and the fact that it's, I mean, you could bring in, it's not mentioned there, we're faith-based. So some people resonate with that. You know, if you're a religious person, you may think, oh, you've got similar ideas to me, or I can relate to that, therefore I'd like to give my money. And I recognize some people might absolutely move away from that and say, there's no way I'm giving my money to a faith-based organization. So that's that fine line. We can't do anything about it. We are a faith-based. And when I say that, traditionally it's been the Sisters of Mercy. The nuns have recently, I think I mentioned in the first session, retired and slowed down. They're aging and there aren't enough coming in to take their place. So we've just morphed into a new governance. It affects us from a very high level perspective, but on a day-to-day basis, Mercy Connect is a disability service trying to assist people to live a fulfilled life. That's the essence of what we do. So the faith-based factor still comes into it when it comes to people going, I'll give to you or I won't, because religion is obviously a very polarizing, or can be polarizing. So,
but that's if the focus is on the religious aspects of it.
Yeah.
And I think what you need to also consider here is that from a communications perspective, it goes back to those appeals. Then what type of appeals are you going to use? Then the appeals would be emotional appeals or rational appeals. So you break it up into those two. So if you look at a lot of campaigns, they'll start off and they'll hook you in by providing some sort of emotional appeal. So if you think about someone like the Salvation Army, for example, they might have a young child who hasn't had breakfast and is going to school. So that gets people in terms of the emotional appeal. But then when you talk about it from a rational perspective, then you start saying, well, these are all the things that the Salvation Army does. Now, the Salvation Army is also based on a religious group. And not everybody, I mean, most people aren't aligned with the Salvation Army, but what they've done very well is really promote their campaigns. And like Elizabeth said before, they have that door knock appeal every year, and they're famous for it. People know that campaign. Well, I'm not sure if it's as popular now as what it used to be, but I can still sing you the jingle. I'm going to knock on your door, ring on your bell, tap on your window too. I'm not singing it, obviously, but that was their jingle, and people knew that the same time every year they would come and door knock, and people would donate.
Just to kind of go off the door knock as well, one thing that I think the Salvos did really well is that they implemented a lot of volunteers for that. So I know that with my school, they came to us and they actually asked a lot of our school kids to come and do it. Now, this was many years ago, so I'm going to say when I actually did
Don't talk to me about many years ago, but anyhow.
but yeah, so I think obviously we can't do the same thing with Mercy Connect because it's not as widespread.
No, sure, absolutely.
National, but like we can definitely take ideas of them in terms of how they have that emotional appeal going into
Correct.
emotional appeal, how they obviously are some sort of religious-based organization where they do have that faith base that is probably not as well known as maybe like other organizations, because they don't, like, whilst they do have their faith and their values as part of it, they don't say, hey, I'm from this religion, you know, like, look at me. They kind of like subtly, I think, just implement it.
But
So-
again, talking about that emotional appeal,
Yeah.
if something happens, like if I'm a parent of an autistic child, then I'm immediately tuned into that because I'm impacted. And so from that perspective, there is an emotional element there that I might link to. Now, having said that, I've then got family, I've got friends who then know that I'm in that situation. So then they're kind of associated. So the important is, it's about telling a story. It's about being able to say, well, this is the good that this organisation does. It's really not saying anything about the religious background, although in certain circles it might be relevant, but you wouldn't do that. Again, remember, we're targeting. So depending on who we're targeting, then you have to tweak the message a little bit. Okay. Is there anything you have found that competitors might be doing well? So again, that's I think that's something that probably you guys need to do, is try and identify what the competitors are doing a little bit differently. And we know that we've narrowed that down to those three key competitors, being Live Better, Qunari, and non-registered providers being the third. Are there any staff who volunteer their time, or all members of the organisation hired employees? And so again, there is a volunteer program. Oh, sorry, there is one that's being launched. So again, that might be something that you can incorporate in your campaign here, is saying that, yes, there are. One of the things that you recommend is that the volunteer program is launched, which is essentially what you were saying just a moment ago, Gabriella. Do you like being called Gabriella or Gabby?
I go by Gabriella, Gabby, Gabs, you know.
All right, just so I'm not, I don't want to offend.
Whatever is easier for you.
You'll be happy to know that if my son was born a girl, he was going to be Gabriella as well.
Oh,
There you
nice.
go. We might just scroll down, please. All right, we're nearly there. Would you say that the organisation as a whole has a coherent mission on how to promote their brand and promote hand to heart? Or is there, I'm not quite sure what "or is there" means, but no activity since initial launch, intent is to rebuild for a relaunch. Okay, so I think, as Elizabeth mentioned before, the history of this was that I would suggest they were sitting around a table and they were trying to come up with some sort of name, and somebody came up with hand to heart, and they jumped on it, and there was really no thought in terms of the branding, or no thought in terms of what was behind that. So that's probably an area that you could focus some of your attention on, in terms of, if you're going to use the hand to heart name and approach, you'll then give it some substance, because at the moment it's really just a name with nothing attached to it. Now that would be a pretty big assignment. So it might really just be, the recommendation is that there is some, that there's some work done on that hand to heart brand, or it might be that you redirect it somewhere else. Okay. Are there any charities, partnerships in place currently that offer funding grants rather than a service? Yeah, so that's fair. So you'll find that there's often going to be places where you can apply for grants and what have you. Mercy Connect applies for grants. I don't know if it's really relevant to what we're talking about in terms of the hand to heart branding or building that awareness, though. I think that's complicating it. What do you think, Elizabeth?
I think it is. I was happy to answer the question. I think we're looking, I would see grants and partnerships, not so much. Grants are very much inward. You know, we're looking at what we can get from external organisations to assist us.
Yeah.
And the partnerships are about reinforcing, I suppose. So Rotary actually does give grants. We've received some of theirs, but we also have partnerships with them. But from a purely us seeking assistance, support, donations, that's us looking out to the wider community and trying to tug at the heartstrings, as you've said, Andrew. So I think we can, that whilst they're related and they sit with my role, they're not, that for this purpose, they don't combine.
Grants
I
are
would
different
go-
to
yeah.
donations. Whilst
Yeah.
it's still raising funds, it's a formal fill out a form, meet the criteria, do all those sorts of things.
And for a very specific, you
Yeah.
have to, seek a grant to extend your kitchen or to introduce a program that you see has merit. Whereas seeking donations has that flexibility. If we say we've got a campaign, I don't necessarily, and maybe you think differently, all of you, I don't think we have to necessarily pin it on a particular, we need a table to sit around because we've got meals to serve, we don't have anywhere to sit. There's a lot more flexibility with us saying, can you give to us so we can give to our participants? So we can choose where that money goes. And there's a lot more ability then to do more with our participants, because I think I mentioned in the first session, the participants receive the money, but that specifically is for the service that they engage us for. It might be accommodation, it might be meal support, it might be taking them shopping. It's not for the add-ons, and the add-ons are what we're looking to get the fundraising for. So we might like to paint the wall pink or yellow because we understand that's a colour that people really calms them down and helps them from a sensory perspective to appreciate, and they're probably not red or yellow or pink. But helping people with behavioural issues, it might, but we don't have the money for that because the money we get is purely to provide the service, and the colour of the wall is the colour of the wall. So we may seek a grant for that, but if we have some funding that enables us to go that bit extra, that's the whole idea behind Hand to Heart, giving and enabling us to probably put the icing on the cake, for want of a better description, just to give that bit more and have that opportunity. It might be to employ someone who is there to greet them every day. It might be whatever we think it needs at the time that the gap in our service is, and the gaps are obviously fluid. But for the most part, it's all about enabling and assisting the people who we support.
And your calming colour, just to add to the
Blue.
conversation, is blue. Yeah.
Blue. As soon as I said pink, I'm thinking it's blue. But
That's all
anyway.
right. Okay. All right. So that's good. So I think that kind of helps in terms of in terms of where we're going with this. Other than not having a corporate fundraising strategy in place, okay, I think a corporate fundraising strategy is important in terms of what we're talking about, because that is that's quite different to a grant application. Okay, so Cam, are there any internal, external issues that can be identified that could potentially be preventing limited brand awareness perception? There has been a concerted effort to promote Hand to Heart due to competing priorities. We are looking at rebuilding and relaunching the Hand to Heart program. Yeah, so I think in terms of, is there a corporate fundraising strategy at the moment?
Not a definitive one. It's kind of a mixture of some of the information we forwarded through is at B2B, and otherwise, again, it came about before I was brought in. So no, not a formal one.
I mean, look, corporate fundraising strategies are very difficult because they get bombarded with requests for funding from everyone, whether it's sporting organisations, whether it's other charities, whatever it might be. And so they'll often align themselves with one organisation. So it might be that, are you aligned with any particular organisation at the moment?
No,
so that might be something where you guys can take this and go, well, actually, we know that there's no specific organisation that is aligned with Mercy Connect. So that might be something that you could look at it in terms of part of your approach. What marketing strategies have worked well? We have consistency of branding across the organisation. Fleet vehicles enhance recognition, but awareness is low, so people are unable to make the connection. Okay, so just to explain that, so that's really talking about the Mercy Connect and Hand to Heart brands, isn't it, Elizabeth? It's kind of saying, well, people are aware of who Mercy Connect is, but not necessarily Hand to Heart, correct?
Yeah, I would say nobody's aware of Hand to Heart. If you said it, people would say, what's that?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's about building that hand to heart awareness is the priority here.
Yeah.
Media relationships have been built and now happy to pick up majority of stories. So that's a public relations approach. And intranet and teams have created, used to enhance communication across the
So
organisation.
that's internal, and it's
Yeah.
probably not even relevant to this.
Oh, look, I think internally you've got to have stuff happening. You've got to make sure that everybody's on brand and that people are communicating or singing the same song. But yeah, it's probably not something that you guys need to focus on in this assignment. Okay, so can we just scroll down a little bit further? Okay, all right. Why do you think individuals choose competitors over your organisation? Now, I think given what we're talking about tonight, we're really talking about in context of why people would donate and why people would get involved with the hand to heart side of things. So you probably don't need to go down this path. Okay, so I think you can leave that one out. How would you say your target market, who would you say your target market is? Both primary and secondary markets. Is it the individual or guardian support workers, families? I think that's a good question in terms of who the target market is in context of donors. So what do we think of it in context of donors? Because I think we need to be, when we're talking about target market for donors, I think we can extend the reach beyond families who are affected. What do you think about that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, if you put it from a donation perspective, it would be much more the secondary than it's not the individuals, because often they're not in a position, as we've said there, to make a decision for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's beyond that, and it's the point you touched on earlier, Andrew, when you said, you know, if I have a child with disability, then my friends are aware of that, so then they become tuned in, I suppose, as am I, to what that organisation or the services that assist the person with that disability offer. So it's not a personal, an individual, it's probably more beyond that secondary. And the donors too, you would be going to them. That's how it usually works. You go to who you know. So you wouldn't be asking the participants to donate to your cause, because their money goes to the services. You'd be asking their family and friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting, a similar one to what we're talking about. So it was a museum, and they were trying to raise money, and it was a museum in the Northern Beaches, and so they had a very small following. That it was maybe 200 people, and because COVID had hit, they were wiped. People basically went, well, for 2 years we're not going anywhere near the place. So it was trying to rebuild that. And when you think about people who are engaged with something, when circumstances change and people's behavior changes, getting them to come back can be really challenging. And so again, it's, I guess what I'm saying is, in terms of a museum, that they're doing some good for the community, it's not something that everybody's interested in. It's something that they're interested in directly, because they either were initially involved with it or because they've been introduced to it by somebody else. And I think that's going to be a similar scenario here, in that if you're trying to get people to donate, then you're really targeting those people that are already linked to the organisation in some way, or who have an indirect relationship to the organisation. Okay. As you operate in smaller rural areas, what do you find the most successful platform for advertising is? Word of mouth, social media, radio, print. Okay, I think that's been answered for you. But I would say that in a small rural area, relationships is super important. So I will be focusing on relationships. I absolutely agree that print is a waste of money. And again, you can't measure it. You don't know. If it does anything, it just shows people that you're around. But, think about other things. In a small area, instead of doing print media, you might do bus advertising or outdoor advertising, or something that people see regularly. They go past it every day. Yes, Samantha.
Just a question in regards to print media. So things like, say, mail, that wouldn't work, would you say?
Snail mail, so doing an absolute a mail campaign in a particular area.
Yeah, just because we were touching.
I'm not saying it wouldn't work. Yeah, don't. Sorry, I probably was a bit harsh in saying that directly. Print works in terms if it's targeted and what have you. But again, I think when you look at any campaign, it has to be an integrated marketing communications campaign, which has a number of elements to it, so that people get that repetition. Because for people to absorb a message, if you show it to them once, they won't absorb it. If you show it to them twice, they won't absorb it. I think it takes about 8 or 9 times that somebody needs to see something before they actually really tune into it. And so from that perspective, that's where you might go, well, if we're actually got a billboard which is in a prominent place, then people see that every day. It's not a big town, it's not a big area, so people drive past that all the time, and so they see it and they become quite familiar with that particular advertisement or that particular thing, and then they hear it on the radio, so then that increases the awareness again. Then they hear someone talking about it, then they see something on social media, and it's all those touch points which become important. And so that's how you want it. So, if you did decide, so when I say print doesn't work, well, I think print's too expensive for what and there's no way to measure it. But if you then do at the end of it, you might go, well, part of our campaign is going to be to actually provide some sort of survey which talks about how people found out about us. And so that's where you would then identify if print has worked or not.
If I can just give some clarity around our comments around print media not working. Print does not, I should say. We just had some ads running in our local paper here. And Harry's prefaced that with the fact that our intake team, who are the ones that are listening to people saying, I'd like Mercy Connect to be my service, they always do a little bit of a run through of how did you hear about us, and they capture that. And as much as I say we've done a bit of it probably ran for 2 months, and in that time we didn't get anyone saying, oh, we saw it in the local news.
Yeah.
I think Albury's a place that, you're quite right, Andrew, we've got some key billboards and we've looked into them. We're thinking about the cinema. And again, it's who do you want, what are you trying to do, why are we doing it? From an awareness perspective, the cinema would work. It's the cost that's the inhibitor, and we're trying to make sure we have value for money. And to be honest, I'm quite surprised we're doing the radio campaign, because I think at the moment we just need to focus on calming down the things that are going on internally, and then we can work with this campaign and then launch it however we decide to. And it would be a combination of things. But the print from a mail out campaign, I think, would work. There's a lot of people who traditionally do rely on their mail, and I think we're an aging population here. We do have quite a cohort in the 60 plus age range, and a lot of the carers themselves or the family members are older. So there's that perspective to consider if we're trying to pitch to the people that support or care for the people that we ultimately provide assistance to. So it, I suppose, depends on where you are, but I would love to explore the billboard perspective and the cinema. And I think there's nothing wrong with the print media we've done. It's just as you've said, we can't measure it easily. And if our only option to measure it is somebody saying, I heard about you because of, at the moment, the number one is word of mouth, or it's coming from, there are people called, I always get it wrong, and I think it's in here somewhere, the terminology, the support coordinators, that's the word I'm looking for. So the strange part about a disability service such as our own is we might have somebody who lives in our accommodation, but they receive their assistance to go to community inclusion, which is your day programs, from another provider. It's really odd. So we're not exclusive, and I haven't said that before. A person can get multiple organisations providing them with assistance, and that again is about that choice and about some people bring a carer with them. So they might have employed someone to be their support coordinator, but Mercy Connect gives them, as I said, their accommodation. So the support coordinators that themselves get exposure to what we do, and then they refer others through. So that's probably one of the key reference points at the moment from a participant coming in perspective. And then in addition to that, the behaviour supports team who go and assist people to try and get through their day as best they can if they've got particular behaviours that present for them. So, and that's that absolute, as Andrew said, the relationships and the people who are on the ground for the most part.
But again, just remember that we're now focusing much of our attention on the charity, the charity and the fundraising. So, okay. I see we've got a couple of others who've joined us. Hi guys, Sophie Angard, nice to see you. Okay, so final question, where would you rank your product service against the industry market? More specifically hand to heart, but other competitors too. So I think we've answered that, to be honest, haven't we?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we can stop the share now, Gabby. All right, so anything else we want to touch on before we wind up? I think what I'll do is, as I said, I'll make sure that I get the recording and I'll make that available to you tomorrow. It won't come through for a little while, so it's going to. You guys will probably have your meeting now. Is there anything else you want to ask Elizabeth whilst we've got her, or anything you want to talk about before you guys have your meeting? I think we're all good. Elizabeth, anything else you want to add before we wind up?
No, other than if you're stuck or you need any help, I'm more than happy to just either send me an email or go through Andrew, whatever's easier, but don't not ask. It's probably all I can say, but yeah, hopefully this has been of use to you and you've got a bit more clarity around what we're seeking.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much, Elizabeth. I might just stay for a few minutes and just talk to the group and just see where they're at and just make sure that we're all comfortable. And thank you. I'll be in touch if there's anything else we need.
No worries. You're welcome, and good luck with it, everyone.
I should just mention, just in terms of the presentation, so we're looking at week 10 or 11 to do the presentation. So that's about 3 weeks away. And so we were looking at, I think we have to do it on either the Monday or the Tuesday if it's week 11. Is that going to be okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll make it work. That should be no problem.
I think the Monday is probably going to suit me better. Does it suit you guys if we did the presentation on a Monday?
What time would it be?
You guys can tell us. I mean, look, ideally it would be in the daytime, but I know you're all working, so that doesn't work.
And if it's evening, I don't mind. I can. My husband's lecturing. He normally is on from 6 o'clock. So from my end, any later is probably better because then we're not competing for bandwidth. We end up hotspotting living in a regional location. It's terrible. So I really don't mind. I'll work in with you if I need to. I can stay at work as well. So I
think for the group, I think anything before 7:30 is a problem.
Yeah, no, after 7:30 is no problem. So whatever works for you, it's easy.
Okay.
For me.
Well, we'll come back to you with a definite time.
Yep.
But yeah, at this stage, we're saying Monday night, week 11, which is we're in week 8 at the moment.
Okay. All right. No problem.
Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth.
And I'll talk to you later. Good night.
Thanks very much. See you.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thank you. I think that was pretty good. I think it's kind of clarified a few things for us. Just in terms of narrowing down what you need to do. So I think the journey we've been on so far is good because we've got a pretty complete picture of what's going on now. Well, at least I think we've talked about a number of different elements. But as she said, I think we need to be a little bit more focused on the brief that they provided. So she's now adjusted that a little bit and focus more on the hand-to-heart element in context of donations. And you can still talk about what they do and all those sorts of things. But I think in terms of trying to identify who all the different people are in different parts of their business, it's too hard. It's not doable, I don't think. So hopefully that you all agree with that, and that gets you back on track. Not back on track. I think you're on track, but gets you in a better space.
So are we definitely not really addressing the internal issues they're having?
Yeah, she's asked us not to.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I still think in terms of those internal issues, they're saying they're going to go out and do some more advertising and build awareness, but I think the awareness is there from what she has told us. And so it's not a lack of awareness, it's a lack of trust.
Okay.
But that's what they've asked, so that's what we'll do. Okay. But you're still conscious of it. You can still kind of put it in a very minimal way if you want to, but it's not the focus. Okay.
Cool.
Does that stuff you guys up a bit, or are we good? No?
No, I think it gives us more of a focus, actually. I think it kind of narrows down what we need to do, which is a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this meeting was about gaining clarity. Sorry, I'm late, by the way, guys. I literally I finished because we are a global business. Amsterdam wakes up at 9 a.m. and we have a call with them at 6 p.m. our time, which just ended.
That's all good.
So just
No, look, I
finished,
think, as I said, I mean, I think for me it was important just at least 2 or 3 of you were here tonight, and we've had that. We've recorded the session, so I'll make that available to you shortly. And then for those that weren't here, you can watch it if you've got nothing better to do. All right, guys. Do you have any other questions for me?
If we wanted to stay here and just have a chat in between ourselves, are we allowed to use this platform? Like, does it have a time limit?
I think once I drop out, it drops out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What have you been using?
Google
Meets, but that's
Google
only
Hangouts.
limited to
an hour.
like half an hour.
Oh,
to
I
an
see.
hour, 'cause
Okay.
None of us pay for it.
Yeah, no, I get it. What I might be able to do is
I
give someone
think-
else.
I
I'll
think 'cause
stop the
you've-
recording.
You've